TESOL Pop, Season 6, Episode 10. Hello and welcome to TESOL Pop, the mini podcast for busy teachers. My name is Laura, and joining me today to share activities that help raise awareness about the environment is Harry Waters. Harry is the founder of Renewable English, a climate crisis awareness English course, and is based in the south of Spain. Alongside his duties as chief classes chap and lead lesson lad, he also does a lot of teacher training and speaks at conferences and climate summits across the globe to bring environmental sustainability into global curricula. In his spare time, he writes materials for global publishers and wears lovely secondhand shirts like the one you see today. Welcome to the show, Harry. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
In today's episode, we're talking about activities that we can use to help raise students' awareness about the environment and the climate crisis, as well as how we can adapt these activities to different teaching contexts. Harry will also share tips on how we can communicate the value of such activities and integrate environmental literacy into existing curricula. As with many TESOL Pop episodes, today's topic is relevant to many teaching contexts, whether you teach English language or other subjects, face-to-face or online. So why not continue the conversation by sharing today's episode with your teaching community? A lot of our teachers may be working with existing curricula and lesson plans. How can they create buy-in from their stakeholders to make space for the activities that you're going to propose today?
Oof, that's a big question. I like it. Honestly, there shouldn't be a need for a buy-in, but that's the case with a lot of things I know. You know, the future of our planet, future generations, where are they going to live? But that said, there is, of course, a need for buy-in, especially in education. And one of the great things about these ideas and environmental ideas in general is they can be a wonderful link to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So they don't take away time from all of that important exam preparation that has to be done, but it can still be linked to something tangible and, I hate to say it, but something that you can sell to your stakeholders or whoever you're trying to get to buy in.
I agree with you. Like, this shouldn't be something that we have to create buy-in from, but I think when teachers' time and also thinking about managers as well and who they report to, they can often find themselves being pulled in different directions. And the link to the UN sustainability goals is a wonderful thing that schools can be really proud of and really promote and engage not just students, but the whole community around the school in conversation about.
Exactly that. And yeah, the SDGs are something that are visible. Everybody knows, but a lot of people know what they are. And despite their maybe failings in general, they are a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful educational framework.
Thanks very much for starting us off with that. I think this is a really good springboard now. So if listeners are like, oh, I'm not sure if I can make time for these activities, you've now given them a really good reason to get buy-in, to make space for them. So which activity would you like to kick off today with?
Oh, I'm going to start with one of my favorite all-time games, and I call it an environmental board race. And it's basically a regular board race, but using environmental words. So I like to get my whiteboard, and on one side, I write vertically an environmental word. Let's say, climate. I'll write climate on one side of the board, and then I'll write climate on the other side of the board. The class will be split into two teams, and then what they need to do is run up to the board one by one and fill in a word for each letter. So starting with C and then continuing throughout. There are loads of ways you can adapt this to different classes. You know, you can do this with your youngest kids, and maybe you've just learned animals, and you can just make animals the topic. Or for your higher level classes, you could focus it more on environmental vocabulary, or something along those lines. And you can then take it a step further and use the words that you've collected and put them into a story. You know, maybe you can write an environmental story using the words that you got from climate.
This is a really lovely idea to kind of recycle language and get learners reviewing language. And like you said, it could be a brainstorming as a springboard to a creative project. What's the most memorable words that students have come up with when you've been playing this environmental board race?
Oof. I think my favorite one that actually ever came up, and it's very strange to say this, but I was teaching a first certificate class, and we got to the E, and they wrote environmentally friendly. And for me, suddenly, my challenge was whoever could write the longest word got the points. And that student had gone from thinking environment, and I thought I need to make it longer. So they turned it into environmentally. And then as soon as environmentally came into their head, they were like, oh, environmentally friendly. I've heard that before. So just seeing that kind of process in the students, and it's also something that is really useful to different parts of the first certificate exam. You can find those words in there. You can find them turning using adverbs, and you can just see the wheels turning. So for me, environmentally friendly was probably my favorite.
That's a brilliant memory to have of that activity. This is a really good activity you got started with, and such an easy one that teachers can already adapt if they're not already doing board races of some sort. I think a lot of teachers do. This is one that can just make a simple switch to, make a slight change to bring the environment into the classroom. So, with that, what's your next one? How are you going to top this?
Oof, they get better. Don't worry, they get
Yeah.
better. The next one I like to call snowballs, because I live in Seville where it's currently very, very hot. So the idea of seeing a snowball at the moment is my dream. It's also a great way of reusing scrap paper. So when we get our scrap paper, we go to our recycling box, and from that we take some pieces out. And on the back of our scrap paper, we write a planet pledge. So I will stop driving to school. I'll start walking to school. So it can start with something very simple like that. I will stop eating meat on Mondays and Thursdays. Any idea like that we can put on a piece of paper. Then you screw up the piece of paper. And what I do in my classes is I get my students to throw it at the teacher, um, being me. Now, something wonderful when the students are able to throw something at you. They get very involved. They get very excited. And then I ask them to go and collect a snowball. They have to find that snowball, open that snowball, and go around the class asking what their fellow students' planet pledge was. So, do you take 2-minute showers? Do you eat meat only on Mondays and Thursdays? Oh, yes, I do. That's my planet pledge. And then with that, I stick it to the wall. So they've got their planet pledge that they've made, this idea that they've had, no matter how simple, no matter how small, and it's there on the wall. And when they walk out of the classroom, they can look at it. And you can check back on it at any moment. And you can say, hey, Steve, did you have meat for dinner yesterday? Yesterday was Thursday. How are you going with that? Oh, well, yeah, I did have meat yesterday, but I'm not going to have meat today. So, I changed it around. I'm finding it difficult on Mondays and Thursdays, but I am doing 2 days a week. So it's a way of keeping it there and in our students' faces.
That's a wonderful way of making it part of that classroom environment, these resources that you can refer back to and recycle and make part of other conversations and obviously other things you can do with the students. When you were talking about the snowball fight, the last time I did a snowball fight in my young learner classes, another teacher actually came in with his class and snowball attacked us. We were unprepared, unaware, and they literally just came in and threw all these snowballs at us, these paper snowballs. And then for the rest of the lesson, me and my students were like, right, how are we going to get them back? We need to plot carefully. But while you were mentioning and describing that activity, that's a wonderful memory I have. And like you say, the students get so involved, they're so excited to be part of that. And then that can really help generate that interest into the topic on what's written on those pieces of paper.
Exactly. And you get to see this eclectic mix of different views, and you're encouraging recycling as well, which can't be a bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that then, we've talked about the board race, the snowball fight. You've got a third one in your pocket to share. What would you like to talk about next?
I have now. This one is probably my favorite with teens ish, and also young adults. And that's a 2-minute tweet. So at the end of my lesson, whatever I've been teaching about, I don't only teach about the environment, by the way, I do teach about other things. I just connect it to the environment in some way because everything is connected to the environment. So at the end of my lesson, let's say I've talked about sport, which I will be doing in future classes, obviously. At the end of the lesson, I say to my students, okay, you have 2 minutes. I want you to write a tweet or up to 280 characters about how sport is connected to the climate or how the climate is connected to sport. So they may say something along the lines of sport affects the climate because there is lots of transport to matches, so there's a lot of CO2 that is released, and the climate affects sport because it's getting hotter, so now they have to have water breaks, or there is um, a weather incident, so there may be a storm or something like that. So these ideas that students can think about and get into, and it's just a 2-minute tweet. So they have 2 minutes, they have 280 characters. You're not saying, go home and write an essay. No, you're just saying, look, we've got 2 minutes, just write down the connections. And, they have that moment of critical thinking and a great way to kind of join them together.
And do students actually tweet these on a social media platform, or is it something they just write down, or do you give them the choice?
They can if they want. I have had in the past 1 or 2 classes do it. It's rare though. Usually it's just a way of getting them to write in their notebook. You just call it a tweet, and they can draw a bird, and they can surround it. They can make it look wonderful, and But I have had students tweet from the class in the past.
I think it's lovely that you give them that choice, because depending on if they want to engage in social media and how comfortable they feel with that, they can either just write it and share it with their classmates in the safe space of that classroom, or put it on social media if they wish.
Exactly.
This is brilliant. These activities are so easy to integrate into the class. Like you say, they don't take too much time, but the fact that you're able to kind of integrate conversations about the environment is a really powerful one. I'm sure as teachers are listening, they're thinking, oh, you know what? I can adapt that other activity like bingo that I play with my students. Bingo is my favorite. It's my students' favorite too for most classes. How they can adapt existing activities to kind of integrate the environment. For teachers that are interested in learning more and integrating environmental literacy into their classes, what sort of resources or things can they do to kind of build this skill?
Okay, now for me, there are 2 ways to go about this. One way, and this is actually my favorite way of doing it, and that's to flip the classroom. Our teenage students know so much at the moment. Some of my biggest heroes are teenage activists. These are people that I learn a lot from. They really help me a huge amount. So giving that power over to your students, they can bring the environmental literacy, and you listening to them and you learning from them will empower your students. So that's one way of doing it. The other way is going on to the plethora of materials there are out there. Obviously, Renewable English is the prime hotspot for the greatest environmental lesson plans out there, and they're completely free. But there are so many other places. ELT Sustainable, ELT Footprint has a lot of materials on there. All of the big publishers are coming out with free climate materials and places to get that. So there is so much out there. It can be difficult, but my first step would be listen to your students, and then from that, have a look around and see what you can find.
That's brilliant. And I think also just talking to the teachers as well about what they're doing, you can really create a whole best practice sharing of activities, lesson plans, ideas, strategies, right? There's a lot of power
Exactly.
within the community of your school as it stands. Thank you so much, Harry, for packing so much value into this episode, for sharing activities and recommendations. You mentioned that Renewable English has free resources that teachers can download. Please, could you tell us where we can find those?
You can find them on the elaborately named renewableenglish.com. It's all there. There are videos to go with classes, so they're pre-made classes which have worksheets as well, and we have live classes every other Friday.
You can also follow Harry on social media. Just look for the Renewable English handle wherever you are on social media to stay up to date with the latest materials and resources that he's creating. So if you have a question that you'd like us to answer, or like Harry, you have a topic that you'd like to pitch for an episode, then you can contact us via Instagram, Facebook, or the website tesolpop.com. Finally, you can support the work we do at TESOL Pop by leaving a rating and review wherever you listen to the podcast, sharing TESOL Pop content with your teaching community, or by even buying us a coffee at ko-fi.com/TESOL Pop.